most of the time in the games there are some pretty awesome levels, but then there are some levels that are just flat out horrible, whether they're too easy, too hard, too cheap, too annoying, or too whatever other adjectives I use to describe bad bosses in my top 10 least favorite bosses countdown. And speaking of that, least favorite, these are not technically the worst levels in video games. I mean, I haven't played levels like Water Temple and Rusty Bucket Bay. So in other words, the rules for this one, only games I have played, one per franchise, generic countdown rules. With all that said, let's begin. Final levels in video games usually should, do something really awesome to sort of, be the final level. Okami, while having an incredibly great final boss, in the final level department says screw that and gives us the Ark of Yamato. All this level is refighting 5 of the 6 major bosses in the game, and the last one you don't fight because, well, you just fought him before entering this area. There are a lot of final levels that do with boss rushes for them, but normally they put some sort of effort into it. This game, though, doesn't really do that. Unless, of course, you do consider this the final level of the game. I actually don't. I don't consider this area a full-on level. I just don't think it's long enough to be considered a full-on level. Really, I think the area beforehand, the Waoku Shrine, counts as the last level. I mean, not only is it longer, but it also uses all your powers you've obtained up to that point in both the level and the boss battle in some pretty creative ways. One thing I will give this level, though, is that despite the fact that you have to fight all the bosses again, they were pretty fun to fight, and the final boss is really fun, but it doesn't make this level seem any less lazy, aside from the final boss, which clearly they put all their effort into. Another final level, is this going to become a pattern? The answer to that is yes, this is going to become a pattern. Pretty much, the final cave from Cave Story isn't so bad if you didn't save Curly or get the booster 2.0, but if you did, then this level becomes really hard. Not only is the layout incredibly difficult, with the spikes and the lava and the boss at the end, although I think there's a boss in the other version too, the real kicker to this level is that all your weapons drop to level 1. Now, granted, if you have the Spur or Nemesis, this isn't really a problem. However, it is for me because I like to get the machine gun, and if you get the machine gun, you can't get the Spur, and I have no clue how to get the Nemesis. So this isn't exactly a really easy level for me, and that's pretty much all I have to say. Kid Icarus Uprising is an amazing game that rocketed into the top 20 favorite games of many people, including me. It makes me wonder why they thought having an escort mission in their game was a good idea. Yeah, Chapter 17, the Arum Brain, is not the best chapter in the game. In fact, it's the worst, which is why it's on this list. The flying segment of this level wasn't that bad, but the ground-based segment was pretty bad. In a game like Kid Icarus Uprising, where on the ground segments you get these big, although still pretty linear levels, here, you're stuck on just a small patch of land dispatching of enemies. Granted, this worked in the Chaos Vortex, but maybe that was because that was a huge gauntlet of enemies. Not to mention it gave you more space and a wide variety of enemies. Here, you're stuck on this tiny platform just dispatching of armed troops, but that's not the only bad part. You see, the Centurions pulling your massive land aren't invincible, so you have to dispatch armed troops before they can hit the Centurions, who, by the way, cannot be healed, and if they do get killed, all 4 of them, then you lose, because there's no one to pull your massive land any further. So yeah, an escort mission, because as we all know, gamers sure love escort missions. It baffles me to this day why developers are still using escort missions despite the fact that everyone hates them. Seriously, the only time I've ever seen it done right was in Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, mainly because the person you were escorting couldn't die. And the thing is, this game came out in 2012. It should have been long established by then that you don't put escort missions in your game. I don't know about you guys, but World 2-3 from Super Paper Mario is just a masterpiece of stupidity. Like, how could anyone think that a level like this could be a good idea? Get this, the level literally starts off with you being forced to break Mimi's vase so she can come in and scold you for it. So you need to pay her back in rubies. The first thing you need to do is keep hitting this electrical block to generate power so you can earn more rubies. You will have to hit the block 100 times while avoiding this one spark on the level, and you can't just mash the button either. You have to jump up high enough in order to hit it. And yeah, you have to do this 100 times. Pretty repetitive. Once you win 100 rubies, you give it to this one prisoner guy, and I'll tell you about the VIP room. And it'll enter in the code, and you go in, and you just start running on the hamster wheel for several minutes to earn up to 10,000 rubies. Then you meet another guy who offers to tell you a code for 10,000 rubies. You pay him, and he tells you the code. Then you get a new partner, which is possibly the only good part about this level. Then you enter in the code and steal all the rubies from Mimi's safe so you can pay them back. That was pretty much my description, point for point, of what you do in this level. All it is hitting blocks and running around in a giant hamster wheel. The only remotely good part about this level is the fact that the codes are the same every time, so you can just break Mimi's face, then look up online what the code to her safe is, enter it in, and then you're done with the level. But that is the only upside to this horrible level, and I don't get how anyone would think making a level like this would be a good idea. To those of you who say Kirby games are too easy, well, this level's for you. The true arena is essentially just a level that's a boss rush, and it is not an easy one. Despite only having 10 bosses as opposed to the regular arena, which had 20, the true arena is miles harder, because they're the 10 toughest bosses in the game. The first 6 bosses are all the bosses from Revenge of the King. Lala's Revenge, Cracker's Revenge, Cracker Jr.'s Revenge, Whisperwood's Revenge, Kabula, and True Mid-Boss All-Stars. All of which are decently manageable. Then you get to the notorious Final 4, which are in a fixed order, unlike the first 6, which were randomized. But also, these are the 4 hardest bosses in the game. The first one is Masked Deity, who isn't that hard of a boss, but keep in mind when you fought him in Revenge of the King, you had, pretty much been healed up. But here, you had 6 bosses to weaken you before you fight him. Then you have Wham Bam Jewel, a harder version of Wham Bam Rock, whose attacks can deal a lot of damage, and he can be pretty unpredictable as he has a wide variety of attacks. Then there's Galactonite, and his fight in the true arena is not probably, but definitely the hardest boss in the game. You see, not only in Nightmare Ultra were you probably healed up when you fought him, and while here you have 8 bosses weakening you beforehand, but in Meta Nightmare Ultra, you could heal in this fight, up to 5 times depending on how many power points or something you had saved up. I forget what they were called, but you could heal in the fight. Here, you cannot heal in the middle of the fight. And his attacks are really fast, deal a lot of damage, he has a wide variety of them. He even has a really powerful laser where you have to fly above him in order to avoid it. Then you have Mark's Soul, who's my favorite boss in the game. By the way, Masked Deity was my second favorite in the game. And yeah, he is a lot of fun to fight, although he is quite a bit of a challenge. And the thing is that really stinks about it is that if you die here, you have to go through the whole true arena all over again. Oh, and by the way, there is no way to fight this guy other than powering it through the entire true arena. Also, the areas in between the boss fights are a lot more unforgiving too. You see, in the regular arena, you had 5 maximum tomatoes above you, which you could use, each one would fully heal you. However, here you just have regular tomatoes, which barely heal you at all, and considering the bosses that are this hard, that's not a good thing. Not to mention, in the regular arena, you'd have a choice between 2 copy abilities that you could take with you in the in-between areas. Here, you only have 1. Granted, there are still 2, but one of them is guaranteed to be Sleep. And for those of you who know, Sleep is by far the most useless power in all of the Kirby games. Also, technically, this is the last level of the game. I mean, you can't beat the gag rail without this, and you have to have beaten all the other game modes in the game in order to unlock it. So yeah, I guess I'd consider it the final level of the game. This is one of the most brutal boss rushes I've ever encountered, and not to mention, it opened a pretty nasty can of worms for the Kirby series. You see, after this, the developers of the Kirby games decided it would be a good idea to include a true arena in every main series Kirby game. Isn't that a swell idea? The only upside to this level is the hammer ability. In other words, you kind of want to have the hammer ability for this area. It completely destroys the bosses in the true arena. You know, Epic Mickey wasn't that hard of a game until you got about halfway through Dark Beauty Castle, the last area of the game. After that, things started to ramp up in difficulty, but mostly in cheapness. Basically, there are tons of pits everywhere, and these tentacle things that come out of the walls that can easily knock you in. Some of the hardest platforming in the game, and just overall obstacles that are a huge pain to deal with because of the blot. Whether it's the towers of Dark Beauty Castle or inside the blot, they're not really fun to deal with. And really, yeah, I don't have much more to say. It's just a really cheap part of the game, and is not enjoyable. The hanging gardens from the Blob are a special kind of bad that you don't see too often in games. You see, the thing that's special about the hanging gardens is that there's ink everywhere, and if you're not familiar with the mechanics of the Blob, when you get in ink, your pain points start to count down. You can either wash off with water, or else if your pain points count down to 0, then you die. But ink's not your only problem here. You also have to deal with spikes and a lot of Comrade Black's forces around. But the thing is about this ink is that it's not exactly the easiest thing in the world to avoid because of the Blob's terrible jumping controls. You see, in the Blob, while in most games you jump by pressing the A button, in this game you shake the Wii remote. Not only that, but if you get on a wall, you have to either slide down, or if you swing the remote again, you'll jump off the wall. This might seem useful, but it's one of the most useless mechanics I've ever seen in a video game. Now, one of the upsides of this level is that you have to drain the ink in the areas by getting to these pumps, but still, falling in the ink has happened to me a ton on this level. And there is one thing that makes this level so uniquely bad. You see, a level with this much hazardous stuff you'd normally expect to come, at the end of the game or one of the last levels. The Hanging Gardens is not one of the last levels of the Blob. It comes straight in the middle of the game. And it's like the hardest level in the game. Yeah, most of the levels after it are actually easier. I guess I should be thankful that the later levels are easier, but I don't get why they made this one so tough in the first place. Are you tired of levels where you can see what you're doing? If that's the case, then the Kelp Forest from Spongebob Battle for Bikini Bottom is the perfect level for you. For starters, this level is dark as heck. Seriously, it is really hard to see. Not to mention, a lot of the stuff is darkly colored, so it kind of all blends together, and again, is hard to see. The leaves that you have to bounce on are very small and hard to land on, so you have to be very careful about sort of where you bounce and go. But the real kicker is that you have to find stone tikis in order to progress. The stone tikis, again, blend in with the darkness, not to mention they're spread out over a wide area where everything looks the same. So you have to go through a huge trouble in order to find them. It's not one of those challenges that you can just bypass and not take a golden spatula. No, you have to find them in order to progress through the level, which is something I can't do. Not to mention the level requires you to throw fruit at some enemies in order to get onto a platform, which is also not a mechanic I'm fond of. There is an upside though. Considering the way Spongebob Battle for Bikini Bottom is structured, it means I can actually skip this level entirely on whenever I play through the game. That's an upside, right? Make way for the most overrated levels in gaming history! Yes, I said it. I hate the fluddless levels from Super Mario Sunshine. Why do I hate them? Well, here's one reason. They take away your flood. You know, the main mechanic of the game. Then they offer some of the most brutal platforming in any Mario game, well, at least 3D platformers. Also, need I remind you of the fluddless level that has the incredibly painful casino segment before it? Yeah, I don't think I need to. Sure, the imagery is creative and the music is nice, but they still are bad levels to me. And I'm sick and tired of everyone who's just like, oh, these are the best parts of the game! And because they're not allowed to be creative with FUD, so taking away the main mechanic of the game is the best, so we can get masochistic platforming! Yay! Oh, and Super Mario Galaxy 2 was terrible, because it was generous with lives, which automatically makes it easy, including the green stars! Speaking of which, the green stars were a runner-up for this list. Yeah, I said it. I hate the floodless levels. Unlike most of the levels on this list, well, actually no, not most of them, all of the other ones, these appear many, many times throughout the game. Even as bad as number 1 is, it still only appeared once throughout the game, and these are unavoidable because of the way the game's laid out. The way the game's laid out, you have to make it up to level 7 of each world in order to beat the game, and you'll normally have to get through at least 1, but usually 2 of these in order to get to it. They even kind of ruined the game for me. I mean, like, I liked the overworld levels, like, you know, the non-floodless, or as they call them, secret levels, but I just really don't like these levels. I think they're really bad. God, I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying this, aren't I? Long-term viewers of mine should have seen this coming. Number 1 on my top 10 least favorite levels of video games is the Meat Circus. Oh my god. You notice there have been a lot of final levels on this list? Well, one of the key things about a final level is that it's supposed to be good, like one of the better levels in the game, and this is the worst in the game. The fact that this level is the point of no return is the least of its problems. Let's start with the positives. The character and story development here is actually pretty good, as is the music. Everywhere else, though, this level is horrible. The first part of this level is an escort mission where you have to help this kid, Little Oli, who just loves bunnies. You have to help him find his bunny. You also have to save him from mutant rabid monster killer bunnies that spawn from meat grinders and will beat him to death. And no, I am not making that up. This is Psychonauts. Remember that. Oh, and Little Oli sounds like this. At least you don't have to hear it constantly through this portion of the level. Oh wait, you do. This part of the level consists of incredibly difficult platforming, but the thing is, you need to be quick here because you need to stop Little Oli from getting beaten to death by those giant bunny monsters. The worst part of this platforming is this armless guy will be throwing knives and these spinning wheels. You have to get him to hit onto the spinning wheels, then so you can grab onto the knife and throw yourself onto the platform. Yeah, it's that ridiculous. This level does relent a little. Whenever you get him his bunny, his health bar refills, and if he dies, you die, so that's a good thing, although there are no checkpoints. I'd really like to believe that this kid is saving multiple bunnies, and not that he has just one, and he's going further into the tent and deliberately dropping it. You're then greeted by the Tunnel of Love, as they call it, where you have to go on the grind rail, which has some very difficult jumps to make, not to mention figment placement that is just amazing how horrible it is. Then you make it to the big top, where our horrible 4-phase final boss can begin. Then we've got a fight with the Butcher, which is not exactly the hardest boss fight in the world. It's mildly annoying, and that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Then you get this incredibly difficult platforming segment that's kind of the highlight of this area. It's pretty much the last area, but without Little Oli screaming, and with checkpoints, so that's a plus. The third phase of the fight is the last two guys you're dealing with working together, yet somehow that makes them easier. No, I'm not kidding either. This fight is easier than the first two phases. Then there's the fourth phase of the fight, which I already touched upon in my top 10 least favorite boss fights, so I'm not going to talk about it here. Believe it or not, this level is so bad that when Psychonauts got re-released on Steam and the Apple Store, they actually made a change to make the Meat Circus easier. I'm not kidding. In fact, the version I'm describing is the fixed version. I can't even imagine what horrors are in the unfixed version. One thing I will say I like about this level is at the end, where the whole character development between Raz and his father. I think that was actually pretty good. But the reason this level is number 1, and it would still make the list either way, but it wouldn't have been number 1 if it weren't for this, is just how unmemorable it is. Don't get me wrong, it's memorable. It's memorable for being a horrible level. Think about the other levels in Psychonauts. I mean, in the Milkman Conspiracy, Waterloo World, Black Velvetopia, they were some really creative and fun levels that you remember, you know, just how creative and fun they are. Here, it's just extreme difficulty, and that's pretty much all this level has to offer. In a game where the levels are so much fun and creative, and this is how they choose to end off said game. I am Defoffilizer, and that is why I hate the Meat Circus. And I look forward to seeing you guys on my next countdown, whatever it is, which is why I'm not saying what it is at the end of this video, because I don't know yet.